Little Johnny's father comes home late on a Friday evening, exhausted from a grueling 2-week business trip. As he pulls into the driveway, he notices something gleaming under the porch light, a shiny, brand new bike. His eyebrows shoot up. His young son is proudly perched on the seat, spinning the pedals like he's training for the Tour de France. "Hey, sport," the father says, stepping out of the car. "That's a nice bike you've got there. Where'd you get the money for that? It must have cost, $300? Johnny beams at his dad.
"I earned it hiking,"
he says, puffing out his chest like he's just scaled Mount Everest. His father frowns, confused. "Hiking? You earned $300 hiking? Come on, son, tell me the truth. Nobody makes that kind of money just walking through the woods."
"I did make it hiking, Dad,"
Johnny insists. The father crosses his arms, his tone growing more serious. "All right, enough. Spill it. Where'd you really get the cash?" Johnny shrugs casually.
"I told you, hiking. Every night while you were gone, Mr. Goldberg from the bank came over to see Mom. He'd give me a $20 bill and tell me to take a hike."
Two bishops are sitting in a dimly lit study, sipping tea and discussing the decline in morals in the modern world. Neither of them can get over how much things have changed since they were young.
"I tell you,"
says Bishop Gregory, shaking his head,
"things sure were different in our day. People had respect for tradition, for sanctity, for marriage."
Bishop Harold nods in agreement.
"Do you know,"
adds Bishop Gregory as he leans forward, his teacup rattling slightly in its saucer,
"I didn't even sleep with my wife before we were married."
puffing up with a sense of moral superiority.
"Did you?"
Bishop Harold pauses mid-sip, his brows knitting together in thought. He lowers his cup and tilts his head, his expression shifting from thoughtful to vaguely bewildered. Finally, he says,
"You know, Gregory, I can't quite recall. What was your wife's maiden name?"
Greg and Susan, a middle-aged couple, have just landed in Honolulu and they can hardly contain their excitement. It's their first time in Hawaii, a trip they've been talking about for years. As they step out of the airport, Susan gazes around with a dreamy look in her eyes and exclaims,
"Oh, isn't Hawaii beautiful?"
Greg immediately furrows his brow. "Honey, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Hawaii. You know, with a W sound," he says, trying to sound casual but unable to resist correcting her. Susan, however, is not one to back down easily. She looks at him with confidence and retorts,
"No, dear.
waving a hand dismissively.
It's Hawaii. I read it in the Woman's Home Journal. It's how the locals pronounce it. Trust me on this."
Greg shakes his head slightly, knowing this will go nowhere. He's been married to Susan long enough to know that when she thinks she's right, well, there's no convincing her otherwise. So, instead of arguing, he focuses on hailing a cab, hoping to avoid a lengthy debate on their first day of vacation. As they slide into the backseat of a taxi, the driver gives them a warm, welcoming smile and says, "Aloha! First time in Hawaii?" Susan's eyes light up and she nudges Greg triumphantly.
"See?"
she whispers with a grin.
"Even the cab driver says Hawaii. I told you."
She crosses her arms, setting into her seat with an air of smug satisfaction. Greg looks out the window, biting his tongue. He doesn't want to ruin the trip, but deep down, he's certain it's Hawaii and not Hawaii. They arrive at their hotel, and the driver hops out to unload their luggage. As he sets the suitcases on the curb, Susan digs through her purse and pulls out some cash, handing it to the driver with a generous tip.
"Thank you so much,"
she says with a bright smile. The driver, tipping his hat with a polite nod, responds, "You're welcome." Jon Smith lives on Staten Island and works in Manhattan, so every evening he has to take the ferry boat back home. It's his daily routine, same old ferry, same old ride. But this particular evening, as Jon hurries down to the ferry slip, he discovers he's got time to kill before the next boat arrives. Not wanting to stand around aimlessly, Jon figures he'll stop into a nearby tavern.
Just one drink,
He tells himself.
nothing crazy.
Well, just one drink quickly turns into two, and two turns into three. Before long, Jon is leaning over the bar like an old shipwreck, smiling at strangers and trying to remember if he already tipped the bartender or if he just thought about it. Feeling no pain, he finally decides it's time to head back to the dock. When Jon stumbles out of the tavern and reaches the ferry slip, he sees the boat already moving. It's about 8 feet from the dock. Panic hits him.
Oh, I can't miss this boat.
He slurs to no one in particular. So, fueled by questionable judgment and liquid courage, Jon plants his feet, takes a deep breath, and makes a running leap. Arms flailing, legs pumping, he launches himself through the air like a drunken superhero and somehow lands smack right on the deck of the ferry. Triumphant, Jon stands up, brushes off his coat, and grins proudly at a nearby deckhand.
How'd you like that jump, buddy?
He asks, chest puffed out like he just won Olympic gold. The deckhand says, "That was impressive, sir. But why didn't you just wait?"
Wait?
Jon blinks, confused.
Wait for what?
The deckhand points back at the dock. "We were just pulling in." A murderer sits strapped tightly in the electric chair. The executioner stands beside the chair, his hand resting on the lever, his face impassive beneath his uniform's shadow. The executioner clears his throat and looks down at the condemned man. "Have you any last requests?" he asks, his voice steady, almost routine. The murderer shakes his head, his expression calm.
No,
He replies bluntly. The executioner, used to people changing their minds at the last second, raises an eyebrow. "This is your final chance," he says, leaning in slightly. "Are you sure you don't have any last requests? Anything at all?" The murderer hesitates, his brow furrowing in thought. Seconds pass, and then the man nods slowly.
Come to think of it, yes, I do.
He says, his voice calm but deliberate.
I do have a request.
The executioner straightens up, his professional demeanor not quite hiding a flicker of curiosity. "All right," he says, ready to grant a final act of grace. "What is it?" The murderer glances up at him, his expression unchanging.
Will you hold my hand?
Two young engineers, fresh out of college and eager to land their first big job, apply for a position at a cutting-edge computer company. They're both equally qualified, sporting resumes filled with internships, certifications, and projects. After their interviews, the department manager explains to them that in order to decide which engineer will get the job, they must both take a written test. Both candidates are escorted into a conference room, and the test begins. After 30 minutes, both applicants hand in their answer sheets. They both feel confident. Neither found the test particularly hard. A few minutes later, the department manager returns. He walks over to one of them and says, "Though each of you only missed one question, we've decided to give the job to the other applicant." The rejected applicant is taken aback. "Wait a second, why?" he asks incredulously. "We both got the same score. We each missed only one question. 9 out of 10 correct, right?" The department manager nods. "Yes, that's true. But we made our decision not based on the questions you got right, but rather on the question you both missed." The rejected applicant frowns, bewildered. How does that make any sense? I mean, how could one wrong answer be better than another? The manager explains. Well, it's really quite simple. You see, on question number 5, your competitor answered, I don't know. You, on the other hand, answered, neither do I. Dave, a seasoned art collector with a taste for the finer things in life, has been having one of those days. Stocks dropping, clients squabbling, his priceless espresso machine malfunctioning. The phone rings and Dave answers with a sigh. On the other end is his attorney, Paul. Dave, I've got some good news and, well, some bad news, says Paul, choosing his words carefully, knowing Dave's unpredictable temperament. Dave rubs his temples, already dreading what's next. Paul, please, I don't think I can take another headache today. Let's start with the good news. All right, says Paul, his tone brimming with excitement. I met with your wife earlier today. She mentioned making an investment recently. She spent $5,000 on 2 pictures she's certain will bring in no less than $20 million. And I've seen the work myself. Honestly, I think she could be right. Dave's eyes light up. For the first time today, he breaks into a grin. Are you serious? My wife always has an eye for these things. Incredible! She's a genius! I knew I married the right woman. Dave takes a deep breath, now feeling invincible. Okay, I can handle the bad news, Paul. What's the catch? There's a pause, then Paul clears his throat. Well, Dave, about those pictures. They're of you with your secretary. A young man moves to California hoping for a fresh start. After settling in, he heads to a big box store looking for a job. The manager sizes him up and asks, Do you have any sales experience? The young man, standing a little straighter, says, Yeah, I was a salesman back home. The manager nods, seemingly impressed. All right, you start tomorrow. I'll check in after we close to see how you did. The next day, the young man arrives bright and early, ready to take on his new role. However, by the time the store closes, he's exhausted, his feet aching from all the running around. The manager approaches him with a raised eyebrow, clearly expecting a dismal report. How many customers bought something from you today? The manager asks, crossing his arms. The young man, wiping the sweat from his eyebrow, replies, Just one. One? Just one? The manager sounds almost insulted. Our salespeople average 20 to 30 customers a day. What did you sell, a candy bar? The young man shifts nervously, but keeps his voice steady. Actually, the sale was over $125,000. The manager's jaw nearly drops to the floor. Over $125,000? What in the world did you sell? With a casual shrug, the young man explains. Well, first, I sold him a fish hook, then a new fishing rod. I asked where he was going fishing, and he said down the coast, so I told him he'd need a boat. We went to the boat department, and I sold him a twin-engine Boston Whaler. Then he mentioned his Honda Civic wouldn't pull the boat, so I took him to the automotive section and sold him an Expedition. The manager is staring at him, speechless. So a guy came in here to buy a fish hook, and you sold him a boat and a truck? The young man shakes his head. No, he came in to buy tampons for his wife. I just told him, dude, your weekend's shot. You might as well go fishing.